Welcome to another episode of a show that is another show because I'm tired of saying the same intro over and over and over again. So I'm here with my friend, Brad Brown.
Hello, sir.
Brad Brown. That is an amazing name, and it sounds like a false identity.
It does. It's a little superhero-y for a
It's
pretty regular guy.
what would well, I mean, everybody's a little extraordinary. What would be your thing about you that's extraordinary, Brad?
I'm told that I'm a very patient person, which is very important in my line of work as an educator. I work in classrooms with kids, so patience is helpful.
Okay, now what age group are we talking about? Are we talking about the devils when they're children, or are we talking about when they're teenagers and they're just full of that Green Day angst where it's like, I'm walking down a broken boulevard of dreams? It's like, whoa, bro. Whoa.
No broken boulevards or any of that, because I'm in the elementary school. So
What made you
I'll be
decide?
going.
Well, what made you decide to teach children?
Oh, that's been kind of like a long, weird road where coming out of high school, I thought I would be an English teacher for those high school Green Day folks, and teach them how to write how to write a good story and things like that. But life has many twists and turns, and I ended up getting a geology degree, studying how the Earth works because I love digging up dinosaurs. So I did that for a little while for the museum in my hometown, Rockford, Illinois, the Burpee Museum, and worked there for a little while doing all sorts of different things, helping with maintenance and education and exhibits, and then felt like I wanted to follow up on the education end the most.
Now, what exactly are you trying to teach kids? Like, if you're an educator for these kids, how are you trying to, first of all, keep their attention? And also, what are you typically focusing on? Are you just teaching the general education, like reading, math, all of that?
Yeah, all of that goes into it at this grade level. And my position, I'm not a classroom teacher, I'm a paraeducator. So I work with the kids who need a little extra hands-on encouragement or just help kind of breaking down the content a little bit more. And so I
Need
work,
more individual time. That was me.
yeah,
So you're hitting pretty close to home with that. I had a few classes. I think it was more of the ADHD factor. I feel like it's just really hard to get kids to sit down for very long and first of all teach them something that is obviously going to be beneficial, but they don't have any need for, at least at that time in their mind, is like, I don't care about any of this at all.
yeah, it can be really hard for them to kind of see the big picture and like, how am I going to use this as an adult? But yeah, so my job is to basically break down the content in ways that suit their ability to take it in the best possible way.
Well, since I'm at basically the same level as probably one of the students you teach, what exactly do you use that I guess would get their attention or set you aside from the others? Because I feel like if you're just doing the same thing a regular teacher does in the classroom and then giving them that individual experience, what makes you different from them? Because if you're given this hands-on experience, like I mean, I could name so many teachers I had that had to go out of their way to find a way for me to be able to adapt, such as like reading books that I was interested in. I did not want to read a Harry Potter book. I didn't want to read any of that stuff. I wanted to read something interesting. And my one teacher's just like, go out there and grab a book, whatever. I don't care what it is. And if it's 10 pages, that's fine. You'll do multiple of them. Just grab a book, find one you're interested in, get in reading. Now, I can read at a high level, but keeping my brain on that page was like, no, that's not happening. And I remember grabbing
Yeah.
these books that were like comic books, but they were teaching religion. So I got addicted to them. I was like, this one's all about Greek gods. This one's all about Mayans. This is all about this. And there's like people getting their heads chopped off. I'm like, this is fucking awesome.
Right. So yeah, it wouldn't be very helpful if I'm just repeating everything the teacher said exactly the way they said it. So I have to work pretty closely with the different teachers who help these kids and find the right point of view that's going to connect with them the most based on their personality, what might be happening with them outside of school, what their interests are really. So it's a process of getting to know the kids personally, to know how to get in there and connect with them, to make them want to read something or want to do whatever type of math they need to learn, or whatever it is we're doing.
Do you ever find that, at least dealing with a lot of these kids, that a lot of the problems aren't really stuff that's trying to be focusing in on like in school or the work? It's more of the stuff that's happening in their personal lives.
That has a massive effect. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
feel
so
like
there are
there's
hurdles that sometimes are a bigger struggle for us to look into, and how to get the kid through this situation that we know they're going through.
how do you typically come across, like, give me for an example, like what's one hurdle you've seen come across? Like obviously it's probably got to be dealing with something with like parents or, some stressful situations of like trying to figure out, like with separation and all this stuff becoming so popular nowadays. Kids that are having single parents trying to go from home to home to home. It's got to be difficult. I mean, for me, I know I went through that when I was a little bit older, probably like 12, 14. I was, my parents were separating and it was just so confusing. It was like, shit, all my books are at this house and not at this house. And it's like when you're that young too, it's really hard to get anything inside of your head at the time. You're more focused on like, where am I going to be sleeping tonight? Am I going to my dad's house or am I going to my mom's house? Or maybe my grandmom's picking me up.
Right. Or even if mom and dad are together, sometimes it's, do I eat tonight, for some kids? I mean, there are some very real issues that are can take precedence over what we're trying to do in school. So we try to use school to help them deal with as much as we can. And so there are issues with bullies, or teasing, and where's the line between teasing and bullying. And I worked in fifth grade last year, and that's really an age where these kids are towing that line, and learning social constructs of our society.
That's when I
And
found
so,
out Santa Claus wasn't real, dude.
oh
My
yeah,
our problems when we were kids were obviously there were some massive ones, but now it
sure.
seems like they've escalated so forward, like stuff that's supposed to be happening, like what I was doing in seventh or eighth grade is happening to kids that are happening in like in third grade. And I'm like, damn, like I was walking down elementary school to pick up my little nephew because he's in first grade. And like I'm seeing all these kids and they're all like, like I mean, they just look more advanced. Like they look like they've been aged a little bit. I was like, whoa, like this kid's already got like Sharpie marked on his neck like a tattoo. I'm like, what is going
Oh no.
on? Where am I right now?
Um, yeah, I think like access to smartphones and such readily available information over the internet has probably been a factor in changing a lot of that kind of thing. Like they're exposed to so much more than we could have been, for the most part.
I didn't get a cell phone until I was 13 years old, and it was called an Amigo. It had four numbers you could call on it, and one of those numbers was an emergency contact. And I was like, this is a perfect starter phone because when you're a kid, you have like all your friends in school, but yeah, it's not like you're Mr. Popular. So you only have three numbers you need to call people that actually want to talk. And then it's like you have to call somebody's landline and get through that. Now people can just poke each other on Facebook or they can message them through Instagram or something. I'm like, when I'm a parent, it's going to be so complicated. I'm like, were you sending DMs last night? Huh? Were you sending DMs? And my child's just standing there looking at me like, you don't even know. We're on to the next thing. It's called Google Chip, bro. We're going to be able to telepathically send each other messages. I'm like, okay,
Yeah, then you'll never know. You'll never know
exactly.
how late they stayed up chipping.
What do you find, I guess, that you try and do to make yourself different besides getting the content from the teachers? But like, how do you make it? I mean, you're very obviously warming as a person, which I think is needed. The hair alone, dude, congratulations, because you're rocking that, dude, for sure. But I think that's what's needed with kids is they need to find something that is either different than normal and then or it's so like I don't know, just something that attracts them, like having a good personality or something, because I feel like we walk around all the time, everybody looks the same. I mean, people are going to start noticing that you don't really feel super comfortable, but like we talk about these people that are just like amazing people or have warm voices or just like a comfortability factor where you start talking to them, you're like, oh, this is nice. I like this. And it's usually does a lot with appearance. I mean, one of my favorite teachers, she looked like one of these cartoons I had, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, that movie that came out. She looked
Yeah.
just like there was a older woman on there that was like hunched over. She looked just like that. And I was like, well, you're from Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. She's like, what? What are you talking about?
Uh, yeah. So yeah, I think that a lot of what makes me different or brings something a little different to the table is individuality and just remembering to keep my point of view in mind, and things that I might have struggled with as a kid, or how I got through struggles that might have been similar, and trying to keep it loose and have a sense of humor as much as you can, and you know, be chill with them sometimes. It's not all about like hovering over them and, are you doing your math now?
Yeah.
You got to have some downtime.
I
So we
feel like,
got to chill and trust each other.
and even with like everything that goes on too in their lives, like it's probably frustrating for them too to try and sit and learn. I always felt, I guess I really didn't notice it, but I felt kind of weird that it was like we get to leave class and then go to like a special room or something and do special like side work or something. I always thought it was just because I just kept acting out, but then you start realizing it's like, oh, you're like, I think it hit me when I was reading like pages, and obviously kids read at different levels. So I'm reading like one page and I'm already through it on to the next chapter basically. And there's a kid that's stuttering on one word. And I'm like, oh shit, like this is the class that needs extra help. Like I got sent here. Like this is, they think I'm not able to learn or I'm like stupid or something. And I'm like, but those were the most life-changing classes to me because we were reading a book. I want to say The Giver. I think it was like
Mm.
seventh grade or something. And I remember we just sat and talked about Fresh Prince for like 30 minutes. Like the whole class, we just sat there and talked about Fresh Prince. Like I learned that Will Smith, when he's doing his lines, he would mouth the words of the other actors because he memorized the whole script. So we would just talk about that. And the kids that I was sitting there, like, we're stuck on one page. They're sitting there going off about, like, did you know this? Did you know? And I'm like, I'm learning way more valuable information than the giver right now.
Yeah, I'm glad you made those connections and had a great experience once you kind of realized what was going on and didn't take it personally, it sounds like, and just like went with it and like, wow, I can really take advantage of this opportunity. And that's what we hope that these kids see, because at the age group I was working with last year in 5th grade, they're really starting to realize they're being separated. And that can be a struggle for them emotionally to work through. And so trying to find a way to make the best of it, like you did, is what we encourage for them. Once they make that realization and feel judged or just feel less than, we don't want that feeling to perpetuate. We want them to take advantage and make the most of it.
But even going from like where you said you studied geology and you kind of
Yeah.
you took this turn too. How did that
Yeah.
shift into teaching kids? Like you're not teaching like a history, or you're not teaching anything about rocks or minerals in school, like like a biology or some type of like chemistry class or something. You're teaching more of like just educating kids on like reading functionalities and all these types of things. That's a big kind of shift.
Yes, it is. And I'm pretty new to this job. I've just been doing it like 2 years, is when I made the shift over to working in the school with the kids. And so I'm still learning a lot, but I have that background of my experiences working with scientists on occasion and doing some field work where you see some of these things applied in the real world. Things you learned in 5th grade and might have thought, this is ridiculous, I'm never going to do this again. Things can come back depending on what you do with your life. And so that's what I remind kids of. You don't know what you're going to do when you're an adult. I thought I'd be an English teacher. I dug up dinosaurs for a while. Now I'm here in an elementary school. So so things change, and it's good to keep your mind open to what you may need to know.
So I'm very curious now. Now, when does it come into the puppets?
Yes. So my wife found this puppet years ago at like a resale shop, Goodwill or something. And he just kind of got thrown in box after box as we moved around and lived our lives. And then we had kids, and bust him out once in a while, play with the kids. But a friend of mine loves the Muppets and does great voices. And so I'd been considering this like museum YouTube show that I had an idea for, and kind of thought about hosting it myself and like writing it and using my museum background to help people understand what goes on at a place like that. And I thought, I can't host this myself. I'm too afraid. I'm afraid of being boring. I'm afraid of being like a stiff cardboard host. So I asked Jordan, "You want to be this puppet guy?" And he totally loved it. So we just went from there and felt out the character. What kind of voice should he have, or what's his personality? And then it all came from there. Writing for it was really natural, and so we have a YouTube channel called Uncrated.
Now, what exactly do you teach in Uncrated?
It started mostly about museums. So we'd go into the Burpee museums where we started because we had relationships there, and talked about some of their exhibits and kind of scripted some dialogue to present the topics that are in the exhibits
Make
and make
learning
it like
fun. Yeah.
yeah, make it like the puppet doesn't understand this thing that I'm trying to explain to him, and we're using the museum like as our props sort of to point things out and explain what's going on.
This is reminding me of freaking Blue's Clues. That's what you
Okay.
could do, dude. I'm telling you, you got the good, I guess the camaraderie or I guess this energy, I would say, that like a little kid could adapt to if they see it on television. And my one buddy,
Mhm.
he makes his own puppets. I never truly understood it. He was on the podcast a long time ago when I was doing these in person. And I always thought it was really weird because the only time I've ever heard about anybody doing puppets, obviously besides the famous people, the guy who did the Muppets, and then obviously Jeff Dunham, with the ventriloquist dummies. And then there was a guy
Yeah.
in my town that everybody warned. He had a dinosaur, but he was a child. Yeah, he was a child, a pedo. So everyone
Ooh,
had to stay away from him. But like that, I was like
okay.
so freaking weird about puppets. Like there's always this stigma if you have a puppet, you're weird or something. And then my buddy came over and he was explaining to me his passion for it, how he built these puppets, and he dresses up. He's also known as the Pirate of Ocean City because he dresses up as a pirate, and he's so involved with children. And like just talking to him and sitting down with him, like he's in his 30s, and I was like, but why did you want to do this? And he loves it. He just loves the fact that like he can bring joy to somebody, especially like through rough times or through that age group. Like when he found puppets was when he was a kid, being able to do voices and be able to kind of disguise into another personality and have that communication aspect. And I'm like, that's all we really need, I think, as people. Like we need shows like back in the day, like a Mr. Rogers show, or we need something, that is open and teaching education to kids, especially nowadays, like COVID. Like all these kids that are off school, you're telling me we don't have one of those playing right now? I can see 50 freaking whatever CD commercials for Bobby Brown, or I can see a knife commercial at 2 o'clock in the morning, and you're telling me we can't get a freaking Blues Clues up there?
Right. Yeah, so yeah, the idea is like you're saying, bring the museum to people, which right now at this time would be really helpful. So I'm hoping people are going through our old videos from when we could go to a museum and film there. And we're hoping to do that again soon. As places are starting to open up, we're in Illinois, so places are starting to open up, and the public is beginning to kind of start to move around again. Um, and the museums are planning their openings, and so I'm looking at that and kind of thinking of ways we could boost that and try to get people, if they don't want to go out yet, if they're not comfortable going out yet, we can still bring something to them virtually. So
Have you thought about maybe implementing it more with education with some of the kids?
a little bit, yeah. So I have twin 5-year-old boys, and that they're kind of like my test audience for a lot of this stuff. And they've been in a video or two, and so they're like totally entranced with the whole process. and I feel like other kids would be too, especially just talking to a puppet, breaking from reality. And so we've been to events where we've talked to kids a little bit, but haven't made kids a focal point of any videos
Why do you think puppets are so popular with children?
yet. Well, kids love stuffed animals, squishy things they can hug on, and then just imagine if that thing talked back at you.
Yeah, like
It's like a dream come true.
the way you were saying how like you can like talk to someone. I just started realizing like every therapist or everybody that tries to deal with like younger minds, it's so much easier if a kid can talk about his problems to like a stuffed animal or talk to something, and especially if it talks back and it gives you like that response that you want. It's so much easier than talking to a person. Like I know I could talk to a puppet or ventriloquist dummy, and it's going to be like I'll be a little bit more open than if I was talking to a person, unless I knew that person, just because the fact is like it's I don't know, they is it because they look different, they look more cuddly, they look more.
Yeah, they've got those big round eyes glued
Yeah,
on you. You're the center of attention.
you always got to crack a hand up the ass joke though too. You got to be like, I know where you've been.
Yeah, yeah. So
What do you plan on doing like with the show and everything too? Like, I mean, you probably just released like a couple episodes. I mean, you've probably done it a little bit longer, but what I'm saying is like when it's coming into like the future end goal with it, would you rather do that than, in a form or a way like being on a program?
I've thought about that. I mean, if PBS out here in Chicago or Milwaukee were to hit me up, I wouldn't mind. That'd be cool. But the end result is really just to get people more interested in museums and culture centers. So even if they're not in our area and they can't necessarily go to Burpee Museum every day, they can go to a place that's closer to them. And maybe our video will spark their interest in that place.
Yeah, having
So that's
basically
the hope.
your journey or one of your shows placed in a like a school classroom or something. Some kids are watching a video, getting to see that museum. I think I mean, dude, I love museums. I feel like you don't really truly appreciate it at the time you're going when you're a little kid. You're going on all of these awkward field trips, like we're getting up at 6 a.m. and we got to be at the buses with our packed lunch and our counselor or our adult that's going to guide us through, or whatever, our group leader. And then like you go on like I would always go on 3 hour bus rides, and then like we're gonna see like this air and space museum, and you're just like, when are we getting there, when are we getting there, like I gotta pee. It's like we're not stopping.
Yeah.
And then you roll up, you get to experience all this like going around with your groups and seeing everything, and I think it's pretty amazing. But like what broke my heart was, which I think is, I mean, it's needed. I definitely think it's a pretty cool idea because of the value of virtual reality, but people taking those tours through virtual reality to museums. My school did it. My middle school did it recently. They went to the Anne Frank Museum using virtual reality, and I feel like it's cool because you get to make sure that nobody gets lost or nobody goes anywhere. I mean, but it's also missing out on the major part of the experience, which is going and visiting that place. Like, I mean, seeing the actual objects, and being able to actually feel it in your hand rather than just, touch it in virtual reality.
Right. And a lot of museums have been making progress through the advancement of technology with making exhibits so much more immersive, like sounds and things you can sense in the exhibit, whether it's the moisture control, if it's supposed to be humid, or things like that are getting easier for museums to do to make you feel like you're transported. Like that's their whole goal. And so the virtual tours don't really do that. Uncrated can't really bring you that either. So that's why we want people to go out, not just sit and watch our channel, but you need to go out and experience this stuff after you watch us.
Which museum is probably one of the typical ones you prefer to talk about? Like, I mean, are we talking ancient history? Are we talking about air and space? Are we talking about art history?
Well, with my background in geology, I've focused more on natural history. So looking at fossils and rocks and dinosaurs and things like that.
That has more of an impact when you see it in person rather than when you see it in virtual reality.
Yes, yes, it does. So we hope to show the scale of how big some of these things are with our videos and like give that wow factor. and hopefully it's like, wow, I have to go see that in person is the reaction we're getting.
Okay, what's your best museum memory, dude? I'll give you one if you give me one.
Best museum memory. Uh, I had a birthday get together at the Milwaukee Public Museum and accidentally reached too far to try to touch something and set off all sorts of buzzers. So that was interesting. We were like the only people in the museum. They just opened.
So
So,
I think I have a few. I went on museums a lot when I was in middle school. That was like a major thing. And my grandmom always got stuck being the chaperone. And I feel so bad because if you know my grandmom, I love her very much, but she is hunched over. She has a bad knee. She doesn't like walking, but she was always the first one. Like, I'll go. Like, we're going to be walking all around DC. Like, you understand there's no sitting down and taking breaks. So she kept up, man, I tell you. But she has a photo of me that is in our house, and it was captured the moment right before I got in serious trouble. And there's a giant, it was an ancient history museum in DC or something. There's a giant tribal mask that's made of gold or made of whatever material it looks like gold on the wall. I mean, the size of like a good, maybe like a wall of a house. And I stuck my head, and I mean, my head was like, I had really curly hair. I looked like a Q-tip, and I just stuck it right in its nose. And I was like, it's just a photo of like my body in this, and then my head in this thing's nose. And we got in so much trouble for that.
oh wow.
And then we went to the Air and Space Museum, and they had this ride that you get on, and it's like flight simulator. Two people sit in it. They
Okay.
strap you in, but you're in a ball gyro. So if you turn all the way to the left, it can roll you upside down. So I'm with my 60-year-old grandma, and we're sitting in there, and I'm like hitting it left, and you can feel the whole thing like slant left, like your whole body just flips left and then slant right and then slant left. And then I was just like, hey, guess what? And she goes, I swear to God, if you do what I think you're going to do. And I'm like, yep. And I just spin it, and we're just going and spinning. I mean, constantly free rolling right now, upside down, right side up, upside down, right side up. And she's just screaming my name as loud as possible. And then when we get out, I was in some trouble. But dude, that was one of the funniest things in the world.
Oh wow. That's great.
Hearing my
Uh,
teacher be like, I could hear your grandma scream your name all the way across the museum. I was like, you should have been there. You should have been there.
yeah. For a more somber note on museums and like how immersive they can be and how important they are to our culture for people to visit them, have you seen the National Holocaust Museum in DC?
No, but I'm guessing it's probably very, very emotional.
Yes, it's very
Yeah.
thorough, and they are a museum that puts in those aspects of things you can feel to get a sense of what people were going through when they're experiencing what you're reading about. So I don't want to spoil anything, but it's one of those that you feel things like in here in your heart, but you physically feel things.
Dude,
It's really, really interesting.
that brings up a great point. Is it the environment? Do you ever feel like it can be stained with emotions of something? Like, even if like you're taking pieces out of like actual history, like the Holocaust, if you're getting actual materials from the war or any materials through that rough time, and then you bring it into a place, does that vibe linger around the whole room? Or like when you get closer to an object, do you feel the presence of what people must have experienced? Like, I went to the Pearl Harbor Museum in Hawaii. You have to take a boat to this part where they're above. It's a basically like a long, like kind of like a bridge type thing. We have to take a boat out to it, and it's a memorial, and it has all the names of everybody that died on the ships on the wall. And then below you is the sunken ships. So
Okay.
being on there, I mean, the presence was so heavy, and we were so close to where, I guess, where a little bit of where Asia is, I guess, where Hawaii is located. Japan's not super far out.
Right.
So there were a lot of Asian people that were there, and it was really, really tense for a lot of people. You get to see like a lot of, like Caucasian Americans, all these people that were just staring at them with hate. And I'm like, it's not them, but it's a very drastic situation because of just how impactful the area was. I mean, you're sitting over all these bodies that are still stuck in these boats, and you're reading
Yeah.
people's names on walls. And as people that are involved in this part of history, that's very like sentimental to a lot of people. So we don't take any pictures with our phones, but these people were just taking selfies in front of the memorial, and people were getting so upset. And I was like, man, this is like a fight waiting to happen with everybody. I mean, the gravity of the situation, a person speaking, everyone's silent. It's the first time in my life I think I've never heard anybody talk when they're giving a speech this way. And then we
Mhm.
saw a veteran who was in a wheelchair, and he's one of the remaining survivors, and this was years ago, but he was one of the survivors that he knew some of the people that were involved and went down on this, and they were talking about when he passed away, what they would do is they would take his ashes, and they would have a scuba team, go down and put his ashes inside of the boats to be with his fallen brothers. And I thought that hit me hard, like tear down the eye. Freaking, we were getting ice cream afterwards. I needed that ice cream cone. I was drained, dude. I was like, this is a lot. But like, even before we got on the boat, it's all like virtual, like all projection, all movie screens, all uniforms, everything in glass cages and stuff that you get to walk by and see, press a button, it teaches you the history. But
Yeah.
being at the actual spot and then on that boat and seeing the oil that's still in the water, you're like,
Mhm. Mhm.
whew, like your heartstrings start to go.
Yeah, yeah, that would definitely be a tough one. Being on the actual site of scene like that, that's crazy. And I think that's kind of where the Holocaust Museum is trying to go with theirs, because it didn't happen here, but they want to bring it here. So yeah, there's definitely uncomfortable stuff in museums that, as long as it's presented in a tasteful, informative way, I think it's important for people to just kind of acknowledge their feelings. And if it's uncomfortable, maybe you need to learn a little more about it and kind of lean into that discomfort so that you understand better. And then you'll be a little more comfortable in the future with whatever it is that you're looking at or learning about.
Do you think that like museums are going to become more popular, or do you think they're going to be a little bit maybe dying out just because of the fact that people are kind of a little bit lazy?
Yeah, with the pandemic issue and people having the ability to do it virtually, I am a little concerned. And so that's part of the motivation for my YouTube channel, to get people excited to see something on our channel and want to see it in person. I'm concerned. I don't know how it'll go, um, and what the status of the world will be with pandemics in the future.
All right, now I want
That's
you
a
to,
whole that's a whole other thing.
yeah, I want you to sell me a trip to a museum right now. I'm interested in going, but I don't know if I want to go or if I want to experience like reading just a book instead. Now, how would you sell me a museum trip through a show or something? How would you do it?
Okay.
I'm putting you on the spot. Yes, I am.
So if you're reading a book and you see a cool picture and there's a caption telling you a little bit about the picture, this shark tooth is from Carcaricles megalodon or whatever, but you have a question about that tooth that's not answered in the book, and you want it answered right now. If you're at a museum, there's likely going to be a volunteer or a docent in the exhibit holding that shark tooth, talking to you face to face, and you can ask them whatever you want. Um, and they're right there with the information, and they have resources readily available because they're in the museum. Where with, if you're reading a book or reading online, you kind of have to sift through those resources yourself
Yeah, it's
and
not the same.
determine.
Google. I mean, you can Google whatever the question is you have, but you're not going to get the same. Like, I feel like if a person describes it to me, I would get the answer a lot better.
That's how I feel. And so that's a big part of why museums are important to me. In my childhood, I've had those kinds of experiences and gotten to see the behind the scenes aspect of museums, and where the researchers are actually sitting down with what they're studying and how they go about the process of doing whatever their research project is. And so there's that aspect to museums as well that a lot of people might not know to check into.
I feel like when the movie Night at the Museum came out, that definitely sparked an increase in the amount of people that went to museums.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I feel like when I was a kid, when the first one came out, I was like, let's go to a museum right now. But you brought up a good point about the like the shark tooth. I went to a shark museum one time, and I mean the line was a pain in the ass, but aquariums, all these types of things, I mean, they're just it's knowledge can be fun. I think it just needs to be done in a little bit of a better way. I mean, I feel like in school, like it's just constantly sitting down and, just reading over a textbook over and over and over again or waiting till the clock. I mean, I spent more minutes or more time looking at the minutes on a clock go down than actually listening or hearing any subjects unless it was fun and interactive. And I'm like, we could do this. I mean, it's not easy. You can't take kids on a trip every single day to a museum, but we can also find a way to make it an event, like make it a once a month type thing, make it a special thing, like field trips. I think I had 4 in the total of like 8 years of schooling until I got into high school. Then it was like, oh, we're gonna drive up separate or do something like this. I'm like, that's we should have a field trip once every couple of months. It should be an event, a plan or something, like we need to get out, we need to learn. I loved it when teachers are so interactive, like let's go outside and play kickball or foursquare.
Mhm.
Oh, freaking foursquare, man, good God.
Yeah, and that is something that we try to do when the weather's nice, get the kids outside, walk around. They'll see things happening in the world like hawks flying over and they get all excited and want to talk about it. And so we do little things like that when we can. Field trips are tougher with budget issues, really. It's teachers would love to, I'm sure, um, to get kids out a little bit more and hands-on experiences at museums, but there are a lot of budgetary things that go into that. So that's unfortunate.
Now, when it comes to using your show, have you ever thought about instead of maybe pitching it to a network or something, but maybe selling it to a museum or trying to have a museum use it as a way to educate people? I feel like before, they always have, we talk about the screens where you can press a button and if something comes up and starts teaching you information. It's usually, I don't like the videos only because it's some pretentious dude on the thing like, welcome to the museum. This over here was made in 1765 and it was and I'm like, he's got a sweet voice, but I don't like the way he's looking at me. I feel like if it's taught in a more eye-grabbing way, like we have so many things on YouTube, first of all, that we could be staring at. A cat playing piano is probably one of the most popular if you're not watching like bum fights or something. But like having an
Yeah.
education source too. I mean, how many kids nowadays are going to be learning through YouTube?
Yeah, a whole lot probably. Um, and so the museums are starting to look to YouTube as an option to diversify the exposure they get. And the Field Museum in Chicago has, I think her title is actually like Curiosity Correspondent or something. Her name's Emily Grassley, and she hosts the Brain Scoop on YouTube. And so she had started that show while she was at University of Montana, kind of doing the same thing that I do with the puppet, but more serious. Like this is how museums work, and I'm going to do the work and show you. And she has a great sense of humor that brings it all together. And now she's working at the Field Museum doing that. So museums are starting to look for people to have that kind of draw and bring people in.
You could make a child's documentary. I'm dead serious. Like
Possibly.
Netflix, like I think what they've been doing slowly is uploading documentaries on there. I've been getting addicted, man. I learned all about fast food chains. I learned all about like World War II. I learned all about, and I mean, Jeffrey Epstein was one of the first ones too. And then obviously I had to watch Joe Exotic. Like when that came out, I was like, I need to fill out this information in my brain real quick. But I'm like, it's it's a good learning process. I mean, we're spending so much of our time staring at the screens. We might as well send some useful information in there. I mean, it does suck that we are spending a lot more time inside and pandemic situations don't really help. But going out
Hmm.
into the world and experience things like what gets me is you can't put virtual reality in an art museum. um the brushstrokes, man. I never
Hmm.
really experienced, like, I'm always a fast-paced ADHD type of guy, so it's like when it comes to sitting down and relaxing or viewing something in a good way, or taking it in, I would say it's so difficult for me. But I remember I went to an art history museum, and just staring at these paintings, staring at the sculptures, looking really closely and seeing like the scratch of the paint where it might have been through history, it might have been like roughly handled, or just seeing a brush stroke in a Vincent van Gogh painting. I have Vincent van
Hmm.
Gogh's Starry Night in my studio, but seeing the actual thing, like, I couldn't imagine what that would be like. I can't see that through a phone and get that reaction. I might be able to get like a high def whatever photo, but seeing that in person, and we talk about objects having like a memory or a stained feeling to it, that's
Hmm.
got to have some fucking stories, man. Like, that's what gets me is like when you can walk into something, a store, a building or something, or an event, a historical site or something, and you can literally feel the energy, feel like, oh my god, like this happened here, this is where the civil war, whatever. th- that is amazing. Like, I mean, people that live in national monuments, people that live in these historic places, such as like, this is where Paul Revere rode on his horse. It's like, you could feel him ringing the bell. I know it sounds corny, but it's like, holy crap! Like, I can't believe it took me to be like older to figure that out. I feel like I've been desensitized so long. I'm like in desperate need to, like, I want to ring that fucking bell.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up feeling desensitized because that's a worry with everything being done on the internet. And so, jumping back to, do museums have a future? I hope so, or else we run the risk of desensitizing ourselves to from our history, from the history of the earth and what the earth has gone through, how it operates, how we operate, who we are. We could lose a sense of that by losing these institutions.
I do have a question. It's a little bit for a moderate times, but when it comes to statues and all the stuff that's happening with people taking them down, how do you feel about that?
Yeah,
Because
that's been going down a bit lately.
I didn't want to. It just popped in my head, and I know you don't have to answer if you don't want to. I've been seeing it happen, and I get why people are distressed about it. I think it sucks, but also at the same
Mhm.
time, I look at it like that's a piece of history that's coming down. Because I mean, we could all say Abe Lincoln it was terrible or something, and the next thing you know, if they take Abraham Lincoln from sitting in that chair, like, I remember so many times as a kid, don't sit on his foot. I'm sitting on his foot. Don't sit on his foot. I'm like, I'm sitting on his foot.
Um, yeah, and I think that a lot of times that sort of situation depends on the point of view of the person or people who are defacing or destroying whatever it is and their motivations. And in this situation, taking down statues of slave owners and profiteers from the slavery industry is warranted to me. I think I think it probably needs to happen. And we can read about those people. There will be artifacts about them in museums, but we don't need a statue that honors that they lived during a certain period of time, or the things that they did that put millions of people's lives in jeopardy.
Yeah.
Those types of influences we don't need to honor so publicly.
I'm just wondering when the barrier gets pushed because, like, if we take down those statues for that right reason, then there's people that are going to be like, well, what about this space, in the space museum? There's a bunch of stuff in there that was used to leave Yuri Gagarin stuck up in outer space. So it's like, would that be against his rights? It's like, then when do we draw the line barrier? I'm like, I look at the advantages and disadvantages, and I'm like, what would you, I guess, from a perspective, see a disadvantage in just museums? Like, what do you think is some stuff they can eliminate and maybe some stuff they can add to bring in more audience? I feel like, amazing attractions, new technology, and better ways of educating people is always fun, but like, what's going to get them in the door? Because they don't advertise a whole lot. Like, hey, come down to the Space Museum. We have a ride that'll make your grandmom throw up 3 times. I'm like, all right, let's do it.
Yeah, yeah, that can be a problem. And building new exhibits draws people in, but it takes so much time to develop the idea, to write and construct everything. It takes years to build a new exhibit. So they can't do that just on a whim. And that's why you see like IMAX theaters and that sort of stuff popping up in museums. So as far as what they could do to market more or better, that's a tough call, and that's uh, kind of jumps back into why I wanted to start this channel, to kind of be a voice for that, to hopefully be a different voice promoting that these are great places to go to.
I feel like with museums as well, they probably implement like a good way for people to travel and get out of the house, not only to go see a museum, but also to go actually buy a ticket on a plane and go experience something. I think what really got me was when I was on the internet and I saw that they had King Tut's tomb that they finally put in a museum, and it was like in
Mm.
a one of those airlocked bubbles or something. And I was like,
Okay.
"Oh, like we have that now? Like that seems like a major breach of privacy. First of all, like that should stay where it's supposed to be. Like that's the whole point of it all. You know what I mean? Like if you really want to see it that bad, you'll buy a freaking Southwest airline ticket and fly out there.
Yeah, yeah. That would be nice. It'd be nice to motivate people to see a museum so much that they're willing to fly out. And we do try to do that by promoting events. So it's not just about what's in the museum exhibit wise, but if there are big events coming up, like Burpee Museum hosts Paleo Fest every year for the last 21 years now. And so that's gotten to be a big event in the science community, people who study fossils. And so we have been there the last 2 years and trying to draw more and more people to Burpee Museum for that. So using the events for sure,
You got to
to
hit them
get
with the
people out
kids.
who aren't locals.
You gotta hit them
Yeah.
with the kids, dude. If you give the kids like one of those field trips where they get to hold a fossil or get to learn about fossils, and the parents have to go along as chaperones, then next thing you know,
Yeah.
they're educating both of them. But I feel like that's where it all starts. That passion, like kids see books of dinosaurs and see all these things. Well, let them hold a fossil in their hand. I've talked to so many fossil hunters that are like, it all started when I found my first fossil. It all started. I'm like, when you
Yeah.
had it in your hand and you felt the history in it is when you decided to go into it. So let's maybe take those kids on a field trip and find something out there.
Yeah, exactly. So I've brought Odis is the name of the puppet. So Odis and I have gone out on a little local fossil dig to find the types of fossils that are literally underneath our feet, like underneath my house. Because there are quarries in our area for aggregate for roads and such. So we were able to go out there with a group and find some fossils, and the wind was terrible and the sound quality's rough, but we had a good time.
I'm about to
So
say the
that
best
video's up.
experience has to be probably watching a kid's face light up when they find something.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, seeing the excitement on a kid's face when they learn something or feel the history behind an object is pretty incredible.
I think what you're doing is important, especially not only just doing your job in general, but also the
Mhm.
show as well. I think it's needed out there. I think there's a bunch of people that are really searching for information through, I guess, boring ways, I would say, as in Google. I mean, just typing
Mm.
something in Wikipedia, giving you the first answer that you run with. That's fun and all. And coming
Right.
across a Facebook video is cool every once in a while. But at the same time, you want to learn, but it's got to be fun. I mean, there used to be a thing when I was a
Mhm.
kid called I think it was Fun Brain. It was like a little video game thing you get to play every time during the games. You'd have to do like, oh, what's 3 plus 6? Oh, 9, and then
Okay.
it would let the cannon fire off something. You play different games, and at the ending, you win a prize. You get like a completion medal. I was like, Study Island. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
No.
It is a pain in the ass because it is
Okay.
straight up like test questions. It is for A, B, C, or D, and then it's like you get stars on completions, and the levels get harder and harder and harder. But it's so test like you're taking MSA or you're taking one of those giant Maryland tests or any other major corporation with the bubble sheet. It's like I don't
Yeah.
like this because it's like I'm getting test anxiety. and a mint is not helping me get through my test anxiety. And
Right.
I feel like if we just made it more fun, like, hey, if you get this, you get to unlock a certain this, you get to collect a number of these, you get a little trophy, a little collectible. I was like, don't give me a fucking star. Give me a little trophy with Diggums on it, where he's holding the spoon. I'm like, I would love that. I would be learning so much if they would have did that for me.
Right. Yeah, that's the goal. With the puppet, we can be as silly as we want, and it's fun to write. I love writing, and so writing for two personalities to kind of clash sometimes in an effort to learn is a lot of fun.
And I think I really appreciate you, first of all, Brad, for coming out and doing the podcast, man. I think it's awesome. Like I said, what you're doing, I definitely think that, I'm going to promote it. I really think more people, especially like my little nephew and stuff, who's learning about trucks, learning about like diggers and all these types of things. Like what he's doing is
Mhm.
he's taking like the giant construction vehicles and he's scooping up sand. And my brother's girlfriend or fiance is actually a educator for first grade. So she's putting
Okay.
different buckets of sand, and to see him grab some of the sand and then kind of categorize it, and then also like when he starts making a mess to try and clean it up and everything, it's crazy to see. Because I was like, man, at first grade I was trying to figure out how my feet worked. Like I was trying to, I was
Yeah.
doing some dumb stuff, and this kid's like on like a whole nother level. Like I was wondering what happened if you cut a worm in half. Does it make two? And he's doing
Right.
stuff that blows me out of the water, basically. And I think what you're doing is awesome, man. And I want to give you here a minute at the end to be able to promote your content.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Rob. This has been awesome. I run Uncrated, so it's a YouTube channel, and we just started a website that has a blog aspect to it because of COVID preventing us from filming things, and my desire to write. So we're going to keep that blog going even after we can keep filming. So we're just trying to bring museums to you the best that we can and motivate people to go out and explore their own backyard and get out in their community to see what's out there.
If you could be in a museum, what would you want to be in a museum for?
Ooh, like if there was a display about me.
Yeah. They
Ooh.
even had you like stuffed and put in there. Would you want
um,
to be stuffed in a museum? I feel like that would be pretty freaking awesome. I would want people to put me in the high five position so people could just high five me as they walk by.
yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, I think a writing museum would be cool. A museum about writers. That would be nice.
I feel like if you get to see like Edgar Allan Poe's like original works, or dude, all right, if you
Yeah.
could pick one item out of anything through history that you would want to be able to see, what would it be? That's a good question. I thought of it, and I could tell you right now, for me, Leonardo da Vinci's his notebook, everything, all of his rough drafts, all of that. I would shit a brick, dude. I would tell you that.
Yeah, that's a good pick for sure. And you brought up Poe, and I love Poe. Like for a long time, I've loved Poe. So I think the last thing that he ever wrote, I would want to see what that was.
Man.
Whether it was a letter or a poem or I don't know. I don't know. He died in a mysterious way, and nobody knows.
Okay, if you could teleport to any moment in history, what would it be?
Any moment. I think I would want to see the first dinosaur bone uncovered.
The first dinosaur? You don't want to go see the first dinosaur?
Uh, well, I mean, that involves like a whole running for your life scenario.
That does. Huh.
So it's as cool as it would be. Um, I've seen the shock and wonder on these British people's faces when they found the first thing that was identified as a dinosaur. I think would be pretty hilarious and informative
I think
for
I'd
what
want
they
to.
were thinking.
I think I'd want to be there when Abraham Lincoln got shot.
Ooh, yeah,
I
yeah,
feel like that would
that'd
be
be
like a
interesting.
crazy moment to spectate, and then just be like, what actually like super happened, like the conversation that went on right before it happened. And then he didn't die when he got shot. He lived for like 6 hours after. And I just want to be like in the
Right.
room, like, what is he saying right now? Like, what orders is he giving? What's happening right now?
Yeah, yeah, that would be interesting. Yep.
Man, when are we going to get time machines involved?
I don't know. That would be the end of museums, I think, right there.
That would be the best museum because you could go into that and then teleport anywhere in time.
Right.
All right. Thank you so much for listening to this episode Out of the Blank podcast, and stay tuned for our next episode.